Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Zara Stanhope, and it's my pleasure to be talking today with artist Lonnie Hutchinson, who's based in Auckland, Aotearoa, New Zealand. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where I'm based and pay respect to the Turrbal and Jagera people and their elders past, present and emerging, and extend respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. In the spirit of reconciliation, I recognise the primary role that elders past, present and emerging have played and continue to play in our shared creative community. Welcome to this short discussion today with Lonnie about her art practice. Lonnie's an artist of Ngāi Ngāti Kuri, Samoan and European descent. Talofa lava, Lonnie.
Talofa lava, tēnā koe, Zara. First, I thought I'd just do my mihi, which is a greeting that Māori people do. So, ko te tapawai ua nuku te maunga, ko waiao toa te awa, ko takitimu te waka, ko takahanga te marae, ko Ngāti Kuri, ko Ngāti Tuahuriri, ko Ngāti Hāmoa, ko Ngāti Pākehā, te hapu, ko Ngaitahu te iwi. Kia ora, everyone. So that's a mihi that just explains where I'm from, and that's from the South Island. And I also there talk about my sub-tribes or my whānau, has been a mix from Samoa, the South Island, and from England and Scotland. Mm-hmm. So, yes.
And I think that's important as well here for your practice. So it'd be great. I think we'll get right straight into talking about your practice, Lonnie. So we make sure that we can cover as much as possible. And because you've really worked across a range of media over time. I know you originally trained in painting. Perhaps your best known works are the cutouts made from black builders paper that we find in public collections such as at Queensland Art Gallery where I'm based, and Auckland Art Gallery, Toyo Tamaki and other institutions in New Zealand and Australia as well. And the other form of work that people might be familiar with are also your public artworks, which we can see behind you are in public space and in buildings as well, and hopefully we'll get to talk a little bit about those as well. I'm really honoured to have been able to take this talk because I've worked with you a few times, and even once in Santiago, Chile, where you collaborated with small children on making works with paper as well, which are about the stars and the universe, and I think they're relevant to the works which are in the art fair that we'll start talking about today. So those black concertina panels, which are made on a New Zealand building paper, which is really strong and resilient and water resistant, you've been making for some time, but they always seem to be really fresh and different. So I wondered if you could start by talking about your approach to these works and the way that I think, as you just introduced yourself, they reflect your own personal pathway and journey as well.
Yes. So I have, I suppose, dual ancestry through both my parents. So my Ngāitahu Māori side is through my father, and through my mother is my whakapapa to Samoa. And I'll just quickly tell you that my family have titles in Samoa, and that's Lua Futu, Tuatanga Loa. And the village that my mother was from is Potasi in the district of Whalealele, and that's on the southeast coast of Iopolo, Samoa. I've been quite fortunate because I've been back and forwards to Samoa since I was a child. So I was pretty much brought up predominantly in a Polynesian and Pākehā environment, and I come from a large family. So It's an interesting backstory to my heritage in that my father's great-grandmother was whāngai from the South Island at age of 2. And she was whāngai. Now, whāngai is a term that we use in Māoridom for a family adoption. And she was whāngai to the North Island, but she was whāngai to a Pākehā family. So she was brought up very much English. And that's kind of never changed really until my father was in his 40s, and himself and his 2 other siblings knew that they had Māori blood, but they didn't know much about it, so they did all the research. And then as an adult, I found out that I whakapapa to Ngāi Tahu as well. So since then, it's been a journey. I knew no one down in the South Island. I had some Samoan cousins down there, and funny enough, one of them had actually married into Ngāi Tahu, so that was quite interesting. But what I did was, I thought, right, I'm just going to go down there. So I did, and I went to Kaikoura and I introduced myself. And when I walked into that room, all these men, there was a meeting on at the time. I didn't actually call and say I was coming, I just turned up. But they all looked like my father. And it was a pretty amazing moment. And even the landscape I was really taken by. So since then, I've been doing a lot of research around my whakapapa, and probably most recently with other Ngāi Tahu artists, and we share the same whakapapa. So, you know, through art school, there was more exploration into that. And, you know, it's just ongoing. It's in my blood. It's in my breath. And I just find all the old stories and the narratives and the landscape. It just really says who I am. So in my works, through reading and research and wānanga, which is workshopping with other Ngāi Tahu artists and Ngāi Tahu communities, I'm so, you know, keen to make works that talk about those stories and those narratives, and even that talk about political issues that might have happened in the past or and are currently still happening. So that's my passion. And so the works that I've got in the online viewing room are works that come from series that I've done in the past that talk about certain narratives within Ngāi Tahu, and then also talk about narratives that try and combine similar sort of beliefs from both cultures. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about one or two in particular? Because I think the particular narratives that you focus on are also you know, quite singular in many of the works, and it's great to go into a little bit more detail, I think, about, you know, one or two, like Deep Pools or Tonga Aotearoa.
Yeah. We'll talk about Tonga Aotearoa, which basically means the south of the sun. And this is from a series of works that I made for a show called The Ballad of Tu Haitara. Now, Tu Haitara is a Ngāi Tahu ancestor, and she's a warrior woman. So that's why I was drawn to the story too, because she was a woman, and she was leading this huge party, war party, in actual fact. And they travelled from basically the Bay of Plenty down through the North Island and camped out in Wellington or Wanganui-a-Tara for quite a while, and she actually passed away at that stage and unfortunately didn't make it to Te Waipounamu, to the South Island, but her sons did. So in this work, tonga o te rā, it's about actually her determination to move south, to find her people a home. And there were many battles through that, and battles within her own family, as her husband was notorious for having affairs as well. So I found that all really interesting as well, you know, to the point that she set him up to be killed. Yeah, it was amazing. So in this work, it's quite, you can see that there's lots of looping, sort of a bit like a river, I suppose, but like as a journey, and that her whole determination just to keep moving and get through. And so this is basically what this work talks about, and all the little sort of fractions that would happen on the way on that journey is sort of, I see it in the work as where you see a lot more detail, and then you have the sparseness of being on the road and walking. And then finally getting to the edge, finally going to cross the Cook Strait across to Te Waipounamu, but unfortunately she doesn't live to see that. And the black solid koru forms along the bottom sort of reference that mate, or that death. And the funny thing is, the other thing that kind of intrigued me, especially in Canterbury, in the South Island, is there are parks and houses and civil buildings named Tūhaitara. So she definitely left a legacy, if anything. Yes. Deep pools. This is a work that I was sort of experimenting again with actually formal design elements as well. So running, you know, 5 panels, 2 of blackness and 3 of design. The taniwha is interesting because the taniwha also exists in the Pacific, and it exists in Samoa as well. It's just spelled a little bit differently, more phonetic in Polynesian languages. And
it has the same meaning in...
And it has other meanings as well.
Yeah.
But basically, you know, it's a entity that is a symbol of protection, usually of a space, an area, and they often reside in deep pools. So that's kind of where the word came from. So on the left side of this work, there are these oval shapes that kind of have teeth around them, or quite zigzagged. And that talks about, so this work is a lot about spirituality and wairua and ceremony. And so these forms, they're kind of like voids, but what the narrative is the idea that Maui thought that if he climbed inside, entered inside Papatūānuku, that he would become immortal. Of course, that didn't happen, and she snapped his head off with her thighs when he tried to enter. And on the right side, the very fine pattern, and there's a leaf pattern, and it's actually a taro pattern. And while the taro is actually a staple food of Polynesia, it also, along with the coconut, is an offering in pre-Christian religion. So Samoan pre-Christian religion, those 2 food items became something else and were used in ceremony.
And we haven't put up the images of the works because we're hoping that people will go to the art fair site and have a look at all of them there, because there's quite a few of them. and it was really great to focus with Lonnie this morning. And I'm really interested in a couple of things that come out of even just those two panels, Lonnie. And number one, I think, is something that you see across your work, and it's perhaps a presence of a strong female spirit in a way, or subject, and that seems to resonate quite strongly throughout your practice. Would you say that's true?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Why, you know, why wouldn't it be? You know, but I've always been an advocate for women's rights and independence, and that comes actually from my mother, who's a very strong woman. Yes, and a very talented sportswoman and musician. So, and she, you know, you want to be good at anything, she used to say, you've just got to practice, 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 practice.
So in a sense, I feel that there is, you know, a strong suggestion of empowering women through many of the narratives that you deal with, and there have been, you know, numerous female narratives, but also alongside that there is this sense of expressing something spiritual, which you just touched on a moment ago as well. And you want to say anything more about that element? Because the work, in some ways, they're quite abstracted, so and yet their forms are very strong. So in that sense, the spirituality can be interpreted by people in different ways.
Yeah. Well, I was actually brought up a Catholic, and we went to church all the time. I still go from time to time, mainly because I like praying with other people, and I like singing.
Singing, yeah.
With people. And I do sort of practice, you know, my own faith at home. I've always been drawn, even though I was a little Catholic girl, going to, you know, I didn't go to Catholic school though, but going to church all the time, I was really drawn to seances.
A different side of spirituality.
Yeah, and I used to spend a lot of weekends when I was a teenager in cemeteries. Yeah, so I've always been drawn to that. Anything like that. I've always been drawn to, and I think too, practicing meditation and prayer. Yeah, I think you do. You know, I do. I feel things. I've had most amazing experiences with people, and this isn't through taking drugs or drinking. This is through.
I'm glad to hear.
Because, you know, that happens too, but this is like through a hongi, when you exchange your breath. Man, I've felt some really strong stuff in my time, and that's really blown me away. You know, they always, you know, I remember the first time it happened, and it was a woman, and it was in Taranaki at Parihaka, actually. Oh, it was amazing. You know, I was on a high all day after that.
The spirit world is all around us and in us, in that sense as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Turning to something that's a little bit more personal in a way, like some of these works also, I think, are very much about your own, you know, personal story in a way, and as you're touching on in different ways as well. And I think one of the works here in this art fair is called Hidey Hole, which I love the sort of sound of. Do you want to say something about that work?
Well, Hidey Hole. Oh, Hidey Hole. Well, we always had us kids growing up, we had a hidey hole in our backyard, which was kind of camouflaged through a bit of landscaping, but kind of looked like it was somewhere where things you didn't know where to put, you put. So yeah, so that was the other camouflage to it. But it was a place where we would meet. You meet your friends or meet, you know, one or two people. It wasn't huge, but, you know, just a space where you could be away from the eyes of the parents. Yes, and so I was interested in making work about that because I was at a party actually, and someone mentioned a hidey hole, and my ears just pricked up like anything. I said, "Oh my God, do you know about hidey holes?" I said, "Yeah, there's a hidey hole, I'll show you." So yeah, it took me out in the backyard of this place, and there's a big tree, and there were all these shrubs, but there was this little opening, and you could go in, and you could sit in there, and you could see out and see everybody and everything, but they couldn't see you. So yeah, that's where, so sort of, you know, this camouflage effect to it. And that's where hidey hole, I've had, yeah, I could talk about hidey hole a bit, but I won't go into it too much because it was, you know, things like, you know, be having a cigarette, you know, away from prying eyes, and getting caught.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sense of adventure. And that's a beautiful filigree work. It's very finely, it's full of very quite fine lines. So I think just be good to explain a little bit more about the way that the works are made, because basically you're taking a large sheet of this really, you know, thick, resilient black paper and making a concertina fold out of it. So folding it many times and then cutting into it with a blade, so that in the end we'll have the sort of negative and positive space, which creates the images that you've been talking about once the paper's unfolded again and hung on the wall. So these works take a great deal of labour. I can just imagine you know, cutting away for days to be able to create these really fine patterns. And I'm sure also that really, I mean, you've planned them out, you've done a lot of research beforehand, but is it possible to sort of change your ideas partway through with this method, or once you've started on that design, do you have to really take it right through 100% to the end?
Sometimes you can, depends on what the design is, but especially if you work, if you're just working with one motif, yeah, sometimes you can, but mostly not, because it's also too with the paperwork, it's all about balance, because you can't have too many fine points when I'm talking about thin areas, because of the pressure. Once they're hung up, it can strain some of those parts of the cutout. So you have to think about that. And I have had works where I've started and I've gone, oh no, this is just not going to work. I thought I'd risk it to try it. I usually will do a smaller panel first if I know it's going to be too risque, just to see. So really pushing the strength of the paper. Because the more that you cut away, it has less weight, but also too, it's got less strength. So sometimes I sort of border them up a bit, so to give them strength, especially in the work I talked about before, just so to kind of diminish them ripping or getting wrecked. That can happen, but yeah, it's not very often I would change the design. I might want to in my head, but I just go, oh, well, I can't, but I'll have a go at that on the next one, and then I just keep going till that work's finished. Yeah.
Just going back to the thinking behind the work with one last question around that. And you spoke before about how you talk to people a lot about histories and, say, mythology, your whakapapa narratives. Is that your preferred way to research, or are you also sort of diving into books, or how do you draw on all this knowledge to be able to then refine it into your work?
The books are really good. I used to be just all really reading and researching online, but there's nothing like face-to-face with people who know more than you do, cultural advisors within iwi that know these stories, and then you learn about other manuscripts, maybe, older ones that Ngāitahu might actually have in their archives. So you get access to them. You can put the gloves on, you read these letters, and it's just amazing. And you get to see old photos as well. And that's been, it's just amazing. But yeah, reading, listening a lot, asking questions, and actually visiting the landscape where these stories originate from are really important too. And I've been really, I'm so grateful that I've been able to do that quite a bit. New Zealand's not that big, Aotearoa, but the South Island is compared to the North Island. Yeah, it's just amazing.
I'm sure you'll be looking forward to getting out and travelling some more now that you can. And
yeah, could be
the
next
landscape.
week.
You've got a very cultivated landscape behind you with an image of your work there in Hamilton. With the public artworks, do you sort of draw on the same ideas when you're thinking about researching those, and also looking at site-specific contexts as well?
Yeah, when I'm looking at, because there's always a brief that gets delivered on these things, but they're usually something I can work with. But more important, site, because they can be quite tricky. And also too, you've got to think about your materials. It has to be something that can at least last, 50 years, 20 to 50 years, it depends. But government buildings are 50. And sites are first thing. So I start playing with shapes and forms first. And go crazy on that, just mocking up heaps of sketches. And then I'll start to really seriously look at the brief, and then see what I can work out and how I actually can put myself in there somewhere, my own experiences in that as well. So sometimes you end up actually, I suppose, amending the brief. And I've been fortunate that I've been able to discuss that kind of, playing with the brief a bit with the different ones that have commissioned me, and it's usually worked out fine. Yeah.
And I know you've got quite a few projects on the go at the moment, some of which probably you can't talk about, but are there any public works that you can share with us today that might be in progress and about to be realised soon?
Yeah, exciting. I'm trying to stay excited. It's nearly 3 years I've been working on the Christchurch Convention Centre, and I've of course got working with quite a large design team. So yeah, we're out of developed design and we're into manufacture. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm staying really positive, but we've actually got a big order that has to come from China, and the freight keeps changing day to day, and that's a little bit of a worry. But hopefully over the next couple of weeks, the rates will get a whole lot better, because it really does. It really does increase the budget.
Have an impact.
But I'm really keen on this work. It's a work that's about the Ngāitahu creation story. So it's not the Māori, well, it is the Māori creation story, but Ngāitahu have their own version of that. And it's quite different to everybody else. So really excited to be able to actually talk about something about a creation story that's actually specific to that landscape and to the Māori community that live, Ngāitahu that live there, because that's their creation story. So yeah, so I've got that one. And I'm just sort of looking over, well, I've actually got a little install I've got to do in Dunedin. That's for Otago University, and that's just a very small public work for inside for the university. And just starting to have conversations about making a work for the Brigham Art Precinct, which is downtown Auckland, down on the waterfront.
So you're just ranging across the length of the whole country, from what I understand. And the grassroots work sounds really significant. So, you know.
Yeah, well, it'll be the second civic building I've done down there, and I think that's enough Lonnie Hutchinson's on the outside, you know.
But important, and important also bicultural.
Yeah.
Creative addition to becoming in this.
Yeah.
And I think our sense of time has changed a little bit recently. So if it takes a bit longer, it's not really going to matter, I don't think.
No.
Yeah, once you realise it. And the other day when we were talking a little bit also about the relationship across different media in your practice and your love of painting early on, which maybe we don't tend to associate so much with the recent works. And I was sort of encouraging you to think about, you know, maybe how you could bring that back into your practice. Do you think that might happen?
Yeah, I think it will. I probably, the last set of like ink drawings that I did was probably about 2016, I think, 2017. Yeah, I just don't get enough time, I think. But then I look through all my old drawings and then I go, oh, well, that's actually quite good. I should keep that one, because you know what it's like. You make so many drawings and sketches and stuff, and you just can't store it all. So terrible for throwing things out.
You should have.
Every now and again. I know. Plain drawers, you know, galore, just full of stuff. And anyway, painting. I love painting. I like the sense of, because it's quite performative. That's why I like it. It can be.
Will we see any painting? Will we see any painting on builder's paper?
Yes.
Oh, there we go.
Yes.
Hot off the press from Lonnie Hutchinson. Well, I think, Lonnie, we might have to wind it up, because probably we've taken more than our allotted window of time. But it's been really fascinating, and I hope productive for people to hear about a lot about the works which, you know, they can see in the Art Fair portal, but also more generally about your thinking and practice, which I think is really fundamental to the works that you do produce. Is there anything that you'd like to add as a final note in terms of thinking about these particular works?
I can't. Yeah, all I can say is, you know, to the viewers out there is go to the website and have a look at them. It'd be great. Have a look at them. And I'm on Facebook and on Instagram, so it'd be good. If you had any questions, if you thought about it after, it'd be cool.
And watch out for forthcoming public works and other exhibitions by you also coming soon.
Yes, coming soon, next year. Next year I have a big show at Christchurch Art Gallery, so that'd be cool.
Yeah. Well, congratulations.
So, thank you.
And, you know, they are beautiful works that we've been talking about. And also just want to say thank you so much for your time and for opening up about your practice today. And from across the Tasman, hope to see you sometime soon.
I hope to see you too, Zara. Thank you so much. Thank you for this interview, and thank you to the Melbourne Art Fair.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah. Go well.
You too.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.